I have two goals for the day. The first is to review Hubert Aquin's The Antiphonary, translated by Alan Brown, published in English in 1973, published in French, I believe, in 1969. At least it won an award that year. My second goal is to not spill tea on myself as I film this. Last week, that is what I did. During my last review, I have a very crinkled page in my notebook now from that tea. I believe it was green tea. I have green tea again. No spills this week, I hope. But on to the book. So I have read Next Episode and Blackout, his two other major novels. He died in 1977, so he didn't have much time after this was published to do much more writing. His novels have a very distinctive style to them. He is known for having a narrator who is self-aware as the author of the work. In previous works, he's had narrators battling over who is in control of the text. In this case, we have one core narrator, Catherine, telling her own story, a somewhat biased story. She is what we would call an unreliable narrator. We are not entirely sure whether to believe her version of events. She's working on a thesis of sorts, but it seems to have turned into a novel, and so we have that overlapping narrative as well. She was studying medieval texts, and she creates this fantastical novel that she's writing. We get that interspersed with her own narrative. The two narratives often parallel each other. She writes a reflection of her own life. Catherine is, at the beginning of the novel, in the United States with her husband, Jean William. Jean William suffers from seizures. He has epilepsy. For whatever reason, he blacks out for periods of time, and he beats her, and at one point she believes that he's going to kill her, so she flees from her husband in the middle of the night, pretty badly injured, seeks help in a drugstore. She is a former medical student. She doesn't want the police involved. According to her version of events, she is raped by the druggist, has to escape from the drugstore where she's held prisoner overnight, even though she's alone. This is where the unreliable narrator bit comes in. You believe that she was indeed raped, but then as she continues to tell her story, things don't seem to add up completely, because she recounts being raped by her lover's doctor later on. She has her lover who she leaves her husband Jean William for. She leaves him for Robert. Robert forces her to give him an account of all her sexual experiences. He is essentially slut-shaming her, and then it's an interesting parallel, because you feel very much that what Robert is doing is wrong, but you find yourself doing the same thing as you read. You question whether Christine was really raped, which of course gives you kind of a bad feeling because she claims to be telling the truth, but then she seems to have sex with every man she meets. She has sex with Robert's doctor while he is critically ill and possibly dying. And she chalks that up to maybe rape, but then she hints at the fact that maybe she was just very weak-willed at the time, and it's as if she doesn't really know. But I found myself questioning her version of events, questioning whether she had really been raped, which is obviously problematic. So as I said, Aquin is known for his overlapping narratives, and Christine is writing her own novel as she is telling her own story. Her novel is a medieval novel, and we start off with a young girl who has epilepsy, suffers from seizures. She flees from home because her parents believe she is demon-possessed, and she's concerned that they are going to lock her up. She ends up smuggling a precious manuscript that Aquin doesn't explain exactly what it is, but we're led to believe that it is a medical text of some sort that could potentially explain to this young girl what exactly is wrong with her. We also have a defrocked monk, a woman who kills her husband. It's just kind of an unbelievable mess, but I could kind of revel in the unbelievability of it, in the fantasticalness of it, because I was allowed to suspend my disbelief. I knew that it was a figment of Christine's imagination, and so I wasn't meant to believe it. I wasn't meant to take it seriously, and so I could kind of laugh at how ridiculous the plot points were in that novel. Reading this, I was reminded of why I loved Aquin's first two novels that I read next episode, and Blackout. His writing style is very complex in the sense that he is constantly drawing on intertextual references, on other authors, on events and people and places, and he creates a rich text through that. And even though I don't get most of those references, it's almost not necessary, because through this, what Aquin is doing is getting into the innermost mind of the narrators. With Aquin's novels, especially this one, you feel like you are witnessing intimately the innermost thoughts and anguished destruction of another human being. Just to conclude this, I want to read one of my favorite passages in the book, page 11, very, very early on. But it is Christine reflecting on her thesis, on the disarray and lack of focus, lack of destination that has occurred in her life. She says, "I lost my thesis subject somewhere in the dunes of Santa Barbara and San Diego. My archive have drowned themselves in a committal sea. My lower vena cava has overflowed into the Cieza, whence it became a tributary to the Cincio, which, after flowing through Pienza, Cremona, Ferrera, rushes immoderately into the Adriatic of Galen, or Galen perhaps. Worse, I have wasted time, the years of my youth, and the endless days I lived, analyzing the splendid paradoxes of Theophatus, Bombast von Hohenheim, and the multiple lucubrations of the Salernist scholastics, not to mention the works of Van Helmont and the treatise of Girolamo, Fracastro, Giantin de Calcar, patient sketcher of the countless autopsies of Vesalius, is my model. I like him. I coldly sketch the intimate configurations I perceive through my lens. I am trying to compose this book as if it were a collection of illustrations, all of them treating one and the same strange, many-headed seizure, full of grace in its beginnings, spectral at its progresses, macabre in its conclusions, this very moment, sucking at Jean William's strength and mine as I observe this terrible disorder." So that is her very detailed discussion of her thesis. A lot of names that I struggled with because they are, I believe, medieval scientists, or at the very least, historical scientists and thinkers in the field of medicine, doctors perhaps. All the names were unfamiliar to me, but I just found that a very beautiful passage in the way that she discusses her thesis, and she seems to have become lost in all these thinkers. Her thesis parallels her life in the same way that her novel that she writes parallels her life, and she loses control of all three at one time. So I think I'm going to leave it at that for today. no spilt tea. Yeah, but this was the Antiphonary by Hubert.